You ever get that gut punch feeling? The one where you realize people with a little power can take something that means everything to you and try to grind it into dust. That's what happened with my grandfather's old cabin, the one he built back in '63, with his bare hands. Using lumber, he cut right off the land, every board soaked in history, every nail driven with a story. Third step on that porch still lets out a familiar creak, just like it did when I was a kid sneaking out before dawn to watch the sun burn the mist off the lake. You walk in the smell of old pine and 1,000 campfires wraps around you, and right there in the doorframe are my grandfather's initials, my dad's, and someday I'd hoped mine. We weren't fancy. The north side of the lake was just a cluster of weathered cabins, all owned by families who'd been coming up for generations. We watched out for each other, fixed the occasional broken window, swapped fish stories and hot dogs, real neighbor stuff. But all that peace went sideways about 10 years ago when a developer bulldozed the south side of the lake, put up one of those cookie-cutter luxury neighborhoods, 800K homes, lawns, trimmed with scissors, the kind of place where community means a monthly newsletter and a stack of rules longer than the tax code. Of course, they had an HOA. At first, we didn't worry. We were the old guard tucked away across the water, separate from their rules and power trips. Or so we thought. Until last year, when a whirlwind of zoning technicalities handed the HOA control over our side too. They promised they'd leave us be if we paid dues and maintained the rustic character. That lasted, 11 months. Then they got themselves a new president, a real piece of work, rich, calculating, always in white suits and high heels, as if the dirt itself would get out of her way. Her campaign slogan was elevating our community, which, as we soon learned, meant scrubbing out anything that didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. And buddy, our old cabins were target number one. The trouble started with a letter, thick, cream-colored, stamped with the HOA's logo. Inside, all sugar and poison, was a demand for keys to every building. For emergency access and compliance inspections, they said, and failure to comply would run you $100 a day in fines. I laughed, then got mad, then pulled out the bylaws, nothing in there about surrendering keys. I sent a firm but polite email back. This is my property, this is a security risk, and frankly, it's a massive overstep. Thought that'd be the end of it. Nope. The next weekend, I hear a golf cart growling up my drive. There she is, white suit heels plus some nervous board member. She walks straight onto my porch, phone in hand with my email on display, and says, "Compliance is not optional even for this place," gesturing at my family's cabin like it was a rotting outhouse. I told her the HOA had no right to my keys. She snapped, called the cabin a dilapidated eyesore, and dropped a threat. Maybe the board would find the structure unfit. Maybe the land would better serve the community. It was clear she wanted me gone. I told her flat out she was trespassing and needed to leave. She flushed, red stomped back to her cart, and shouted that I'd regret this. 2 weeks of silence, then I pull in one Saturday and just about break my neck when I see what they'd done, a brand new 6-foot chain link fence snaking right across my property, blocking my dock, wrapping my boat shed. A sign said it was property of the HOA and threatened trespassers. Pure bald-faced land grab. I called the sheriff, who was sympathetic but could only say it was a civil matter until I had a survey. I realized right then she'd picked the wrong guy for a fight. I didn't just get a surveyor, I hired the best in the state. They flagged every boundary, bright orange markers showing the fence was a solid 20 feet inside my line. I dug through decades of deeds, found the original plat, and then gold and old easement signed by my grandfather, giving the county access for the road into their fancy development. But it had a clause: if anyone harassed or blocked my family's enjoyment of our land, the easement was null and void. I hired a lawyer who looked at the paperwork and just about grinned himself to death. We sent a cease and desist to the HOA, take down the fence, pay my expenses, or we'd file to terminate their only road in and out. The president's reply? One line: our council will handle it. Okay then. We filed in court. Every resident got a letter their only road was about to disappear. The panic that hit was like dropping a hornet's nest into a Sunday picnic. My lawyer sent a detailed packet to every homeowner, including the invoice, proving the HOA spent their money on my fence. An emergency meeting was called, the community center packed with furious residents. The president tried to play it cool, but was booed out by people demanding to know why she'd risked their property for a vendetta. An old-timer from my side stood up, gave a hell of a speech, and they voted her out on the spot. Her whole board quit too. The next day, the new board caved, removed the fence, paid my expenses, apologized publicly. We hammered out a new agreement, messed with my property again, and they'd pay a fortune in damages. The lake was peaceful again. A for sale sign popped up in front of the former president's house. Guess she didn't like living where everybody knew she'd nearly cost them everything. The best part, she wanted my keys, but in the end I held the keys to the entire neighborhood. 6 months later, the fallout's still rippling. The ex-president's house sold low, word got around. Then the nervous board member from before came forward. He'd kept records. Turns out she'd been embezzling, charging her landscaping cameras, cleaning crew, all to the HOA. Over 40 grand. The new board pressed charges. Karma, right? The new president's an old-timer, common-sense good neighbor, apologized face to face. Now all expenditures go to a full vote. They've even started a scholarship fund for local kids, and we're working to get my cabin listed as a historic site. The dock's been rebuilt, the sunsets are sweeter than ever, and my son brings his college buddies up, already dreaming about adding his initials to that doorframe. Do I regret fighting back? Not a chance. Some folks say you should just keep the peace, but sometimes you've got to draw a line. The cabin's still standing, the keys are right where they belong, and I sleep easy knowing that legacy is safe. The president learned the hard way, mess with the family's history, you'd better be ready for the storm that follows. But let me ask you this. Was I right to go to war over a few feet of land, or should I have just given in and tried to make peace? Where do you draw the line between standing up for what's yours and causing trouble for everyone else? Drop your thoughts below. Let's hear where you stand on what's fair, what's right, and what's just plain neighborly.